Hello, everyone. I hope you are all doing well. Checking in with you from home this morning, and I'm looking forward to introducing our next learning module on gifted education programming. So, for our last module, we kind of investigated a difficult issue that gifted education is not always a right for our students and oftentimes becomes more of a privilege depending upon the means of the district, the school, and even the family. There are very few laws that hold us accountable for providing gifted services. And as many of you mentioned, accountability in terms of gifted education is pretty much all over the place. And when we have accountability that's not directed on one individual or one group of individuals, what often happens is those services can fall through the cracks. So it is so important that teachers advocate for their gifted students, whether or not they're working in a quote gifted education classroom. That's why I think your gifted education flyer assignment is so important. And I truly do encourage you guys to share those flyers. That's why I have you do that instead of writing a paper or something more traditional. As advocates for your gifted students, you want avenues to quickly share the most important information with your fellow colleagues. So at this point of the semester, we have investigated what it means to be gifted, the characteristics of gifted students, both their strengths and also their needs. You should easily be able to advocate for the importance of gifted education at this point. And now we are going to shift into what do these services actually look like? So for this next learning module, we are investigating gifted education programming. For this first week, you will begin, as always, with a case study. And this case study revolves around a very new hire for gifted education who has been requested to present an overview of the gifted education program to the parents in his district. This is a very real world happening that we have someone who's very quickly put into the role of gifted education, and then all of a sudden they have to present like an overview of the entire program. So it may sound drastic, but it's very common. So your challenge is to review the teacher's proposition, about this is what the gifted education program at our school looks like, and these other services that we provide. Now, this case study is a little bit different because in your post, I'm requiring you to most definitely refer to one document, and that is the NAGC Gifted Programming Standards. These are kind of your gold standards for quality gifted education program. They are put out by the National Association for Gifted Children, or NAGC, and I do think that this is one of your most important resources in the library content for this week. I would encourage you to print these out. I try to highlight your most important things, and this is one of those that I would definitely put on paper and print out to keep in your documents. Basically, the NAGC standards describe the components of quality gifted education programs. So what I'm asking you to do for this case study is to review the gifted program that our teacher has proposed and determine what are the current best practices that you are able to see within this gifted education program. I will go ahead and tell you this is a decent proposal, so there's definitely evidence for quality gifted programming. So within your response, be sure that you are referencing that document. So I need to see you say, there's evidence of NAGC gifted education program standard, whatever. Okay, so make sure that you're really clear in that. The reason I ask you to do that is whenever we have gifted education programs that are evaluated, they are always evaluated against that standard. So it is important that you are familiar with that list of standards. Just a quick overview of gifted education programming. So when I say programming, this is what are the actual services that we are providing for our students. If they get identified for gifted services, what does that mean? A very common misconception is if you are identified for gifted services, that will only occur outside of the regular education classroom. In fact, several of you for some of your discussion board posts have said, I recommend that Adam be identified for gifted services. That's great, but what we need to remember is that gifted services start within the regular education classroom. As you're investigating the literature this week, you will see that most gifted education programs occur on levels. So we have a levels of service approach, and those levels begin within the regular education classroom. So we should be providing differentiated services for gifted students at all times. And a lot of our teachers have this misconception that if they are not the gifted teacher, then they don't need to worry about gifted students, where actually the opposite is true. The majority of education or services for our gifted students occurs in the regular education classroom. So, I'm sorry, there's a siren going by. It's important that you don't make the assumption of get him tested for gifted services, he's taken care of. Yes, get him or her texted, but that doesn't mean that you are not still responsible for them in your regular education classroom. Okay, so we are serving within the classroom. From there, I'm sure you have heard of or seen multiple different formats of either pulling the students out for one day a week. Sometimes it's more than that. Other programs will have what we call a push-in model, where they will actually push into the classroom. There are two very important terms in terms of gifted education that you need to know for programming. So your first is acceleration, and the second is enrichment. When we speak of types of programs, these are the two terms that you'll see most frequently. An accelerated program is basically content given at a more accelerated or fast pace. So a very common form of acceleration is for a 7th grader to take 8th grade math. A more drastic form of acceleration would be skipping an entire grade. As we've already explored, contrary to popular belief, that's actually not detrimental for the students socially, because it does allow for them to interact with their intellectual peers and not just their same age peers. So that's quite important. And so we have acceleration, and then we have enrichment. Enrichment is more expanding out. So acceleration is we're expanding up, as in we're having more levels of content. So you're getting Algebra 1, Algebra 2, and it's at a faster rate. Enrichment is expanding out, meaning we're staying at Algebra 1, but we're going to explore Algebra 1 in greater depth and greater complexity with more higher order thinking, more critical thinking, more creative thinking, and oftentimes more overlap between content areas. Typically, when you have a pull-out program, it will be more of an enrichment model in that the students are pulled out once a week and they explore content of their choice, or they're doing these enriched programs based on one certain curriculum. Enrichment can be very effective, but it can also be very ineffective. So a lot of times what I've seen in the field with enrichment programs, we will have students pulled out of the regular classroom maybe for 4 hours a week. And within those 4 hours, they complete an excellent enriched program, but it has nothing to do with what they're doing in the regular education classroom. That, by research, has been shown to be quite ineffective because students struggle to make that connection between what they're learning in the classroom and what's happening in the gifted enrichment classroom. So it doesn't really expand on any knowledge, and they have trouble transferring that knowledge. What can be effective in terms of enrichment is if we are continually enriching the content, as in you're studying one material in history class and you're providing students who have been identified as gifted with enriched curriculum, so they're examining multiple primary sources, for example. So enrichment is effective if it is tied to the content and the students see that connection. Enrichment is not very effective if it's seen as very separate. Acceleration, again, is more content at a faster pace. So it's not as if we can only have acceleration or only enrichment. In fact, the two are pretty much always occurring with each other, but typically you can see that a program will lean more toward acceleration or enrichment. So it is important that you're able to tell the difference between the two. So again, this week, the first thing you want to do is read your case study and see what has this teacher proposed for their gifted education program. As you are reading that case study, your challenge will be to look for quality gifted education practices within this gifted proposal. So be sure that the first document you look at in terms of gifted education programming is those NAGC standards. Again, you are required to reference those NAGC standards in your response and analysis of the gifted program that the teacher has proposed. Beyond that, your sources do a really good job of introducing you to various types of models. One to definitely look out for is called the Levels of Services model, or LOS. A lot of the gifted education services are going to kind of build on top of each other. And it's really important for me as an educator to emphasize that strategies to serve the gifted will also serve all students. So a levels of services approach means we have opportunities for all students, and then opportunities for some students, and opportunities for few. And depending upon their gifts and their talents, it might be that they need really differentiated services, and that's where that levels of services approach comes in. So just to be clear, as always, I'll be looking for your first discussion post by Friday evening and your 2 responses by Sunday evening. You guys have been a great class so far. Thank you for coming by and seeing me if you've been on campus. And as always, I'm more than happy to connect, and I hope you have a wonderful week.